Started. Lord, thank you for this day and this chance to share your word, to hear from you. I pray you'd speak to me first and then through me. I want to be changed by what you have for us today. So just work through everything. You can work through announcements, greeting, great snacks that we have, chili afterwards, community, the prayer room we have, and you can work through word as well, word and worship. So I just pray you reveal yourself today. In your holy name, amen. Well, let me get started. We all have faith in something or someone, right? And I've said this before, but we all have something that we use to make sense of our lives, to give us direction and purpose, to help us make decisions, ethical decisions, job decisions, who is going to be a trustworthy friend or not. We all have something that we use, that we build our lives around. And we might not know that. We might not be able to say that specifically. For me, I hope to be able to say, I hope it is true that I am building my life on Jesus. That is probably more or less true depending on the day, right? Or maybe the moment in the day, but that's my goal. Others might have a harder time naming that thing, but we all have faith in something. We live our lives with faith. Isaac and I built 4 of these, and I built another one and this little guy. And so only a handful of you have seen the other side, right? Right? And yet many have been up here. So on some level, everyone who's been on these stages has had faith that they're going to hold them up, right? You've all had faith the chairs are going to hold you up. You've all had faith in lots of things, that the driver on the other side of the road is going to follow the rules and you're going to get here safely. We live our lives on faith. We don't always recognize it, but it's just a big part of our lives. One of the challenges with faith is language. We often use the very same words to label and define very different things. The word God can mean literally 1,000,000 different things, perhaps 1,000,000,000 different things. India is known as the country with 1,000,000, or is it 1,000,000,000 gods? Like lots and lots of gods, right? We use God to label lots of things. If you go to a Hindu country like India, you see shrines everywhere. Gods are believed to be present in and around otherwise inexplicable events or things. One time I was there and I saw a shrine. It was kind of all the intersections in India are just chaotic. Like sometimes there's light, sometimes there's a traffic cop doing his very best, and it's just thanks, bro. You're really trying here. They're all kind of chaotic. And this one had kind of a boulevard, and right in the boulevard, right at the intersection, was this shrine. And I've got a friend over there. He grew up Hindu. He's Indian. He grew up Hindu. He's now Christian. And I asked, what's that about? What's that God? What happened there? What is that? Why is that there? He said he didn't know, but likely something happened that maybe shouldn't have. Perhaps there was a car accident and someone should have died and they didn't. So a God must be there. That's the understanding. And so we're going to put a shrine there and we're going to worship this God because this is a God who protects us at this intersection. This is a loving, caring, protector God that lives here, right? Language sound familiar? Yeah, there's some overlap there, right? Since a miracle happened, the Hindu worldview is that a God must live there. This is how we approach lots of things. We might not think of everything in our lives as a God, and sometimes we can stretch that a little far, but we do this in other ways. If someone finds success in an area that we care about, we do what they did. We orient our lives around their decisions and their priorities. Success is God, and that God has his own way of doing things. This creates an ethic, for instance. It's not cheating if everyone is doing it. It's just business. We've got to look out for number one. We find ways to orient ourselves around things that are important, and we put faith in those things. Other monotheistic religions also use similar words. While Hinduism and Buddhism really don't care about the beginning and ending of all things, Islam does. And Allah means God who is creator and judge. Well, that sounds familiar. So aren't all religions really saying the same thing with the same ends in mind? Not really. Many expect adherents to serve, but most see that as a system for acquiring points and winning favor. So serving and sacrifice are really self-serving. But Jesus speaks of and models service out of love for God and love for fellow humans. a love where there aren't points. In fact, your left hand doesn't know what your right hand's up to. That's one of the ideals and the goals in the kingdom, this impossible thing. We're just doing our thing and we don't care who notices. We're just doing it because we're grateful for what God has done. That is a radically different way to look at service. Don't all religions teach a righteous life? Yes, most do. Most have some version of how you should live the good life. But those can be very different from one another. I hope that this will make sense of what I think is going on in this passage that we're going to get into. So let me get into Matthew 17, 14 through 20. And when they came to the crowd, a man came up to him and kneeling before him and said, Lord, have mercy on my son, for he has seizures and he suffers terribly. For often he falls into the fire and often into the water. And I brought him to your disciples and they could not heal him. And Jesus answered, O faithless and twisted generation, how long am I to be with you? How long am I to bear with you? Bring him here to me. Jesus rebuked the demon and it came out of him and the boy was healed instantly. Then the disciples came to Jesus privately and said, Why could we not cast it out? And he said to them, Because of your little faith. For truly I say to you, if you have faith like a grain of mustard seed, you will say to this mountain, Move from here to there, and it will move, and nothing will be impossible for you. This is one of those passages, teaching about which I have PTSD. This is one of those things I come across. I'm like, I just shrink back to 30 years ago or more. I'm like, I cringe a little bit. Well, but Jesus said it. Yeah, but the teaching around it. The teaching was, we're told we can move mountains with just a little faith. What if I can't? What if I pray and nothing happens? I'm praying, let's just assume I'm praying and I'm praying with other believers and we're praying for a good thing and nothing happens. What if the mountain doesn't move? Well, so goes the teaching that I've heard, then you must not have faith. Or you don't have enough faith. You don't even have a mustard seed's faith. You don't even have a teeny tiny bit of faith. I must be a nominal Christian, a lukewarm Christian. What if I don't feel like that? What if like that, yeah, I get that, and we should all be concerned about our faith and make sure we're submitting ourselves to Jesus and letting him develop us to remake us in his image. There's a process, there's progress, there's ups and downs, but what if I'm like, I don't think that that's right? What do you do? Well, you could fake it to make it, right? Hashtag blessed, right? Right? I'm just living in the kingdom. I'm just, the joy of the Lord. And those things can be true, and sometimes those things are just things that we repeat. Do I give up? Do I find some sort of half faith? A faith that moves to the conceptual and distrusts the experiences others claim? Sure, you've experienced that. Sure, there was a healing, right? We become skeptical. Do I have a divisive or arrogant faith? You need all those experiences. I'm content. Do I develop a competitive faith? I mean, how do we faith more? How does that happen? Do we make stuff up? Do we share other stories as our own? Do we go the intellectual route? Or do we walk away because it just isn't working for us? These are the thoughts that have gone throughout my mind over the years when I reread this passage or I hear teaching on it, I hear echoes of past sermons and teaching, and these things bounce around, and none of these sound like the way of Jesus to me. None of these sound Jesus-y at all to me. But we do have to figure out what the passage meant, right? What is Jesus saying? And yes, I do have to be open to hearing things I don't like. I have to be open to being challenged and called out. Jesus does call us out from time to time. Well, let's talk about the chronology. Last week I spoke about the Transfiguration, this amazing experience shared by Jesus, Peter, James, and John. And Matthew kind of lacks some connective tissue. When you read the Gospels, you don't always know, like, what's the timeline and even the order of things. A Hebrew way of telling stories that, like, there's a beginning, middle, and end, but not necessarily in that order, right? They can be in any order they want, whatever is going to make sense for the moment. So that is a legitimate Hebrew way of telling stories. So when we read the Gospels and things seem out of order, it's not because they're making it up, it's because they're making a point. And sometimes things happen maybe the next day or right away, and sometimes it might be months later, and it's hard to know that. Matthew doesn't make it explicit that it's the next day or the next moment, but Luke does. In Luke 9, he puts, I don't think I have a slide for this, but there's a connective tissue, right? That this happens right after the transfiguration. If you remember, the transfiguration is this amazing moment where they're up on a mountain. We don't know which mountain for sure, and Jesus appears in all his glory. Like, we get this peek into the full glory of God, of who Jesus is. And there's Moses and Elijah there, and it's super trippy, and Peter doesn't know what to do. He's like, I'll make something. That's what I'll do, right? And so they're trying to figure out what this means, and then God says, this is my son, listen to him. And so the point is, just like this happened to Moses so many centuries ago, now it's Jesus. And Jesus is the one to follow. Jesus surpasses Moses. There's a new thing happening, a new covenant. And they come down and they come across this scene, right? While they're gone, while they're up on the mountain, the other 9 disciples have been approached for help. A guy needs help with his son. Sometimes when you read the word disciples, it refers to all the other people that followed Jesus on a regular basis. Maybe not continuously, but often, maybe days or weeks on end. We know there are women in his entourage, women that helped fund his ministry, played an important role in the early church. Others that followed him, sometimes thousands gathered to hear him preach. So sometimes disciples might mean many more people than the 12. This story seems to be about the 9 that are down there. And they must have been recognized as Jesus' disciples. Earlier in Matthew's Gospel, Jesus had sent them out, and they were successful. People were healed. People were delivered. People were saved. The gospel was shared. But for some reason, they're unsuccessful here and now. So what's the situation? This boy likely has epilepsy. Some translations you read might even say lunatic, which would have connoted something that's beyond their understanding. Like, something is up with this kid. We don't know what to do. We don't know how to help him. And the seizures are violent and destructive. It isn't just a seizure. These seizures have, like, aim to them. They aim this boy into fire, and they try to drown him in water. Something is particularly destructive about this experience, this situation. So while Matthew names a medical condition, Jesus rebukes a demon, and he heals the boy. So which is it? Is it medical or spiritual? There's a part of me, a big part of me, that doesn't think that's even an important question. I have the question. I don't think that's the key situation. He's probably epileptic. That's another hard word. I'm finding lots of words that are hard to say. He's epileptic. And these seizures are particularly destructive. And that does sound like the enemy to me. An enemy who wants to steal, kill, and destroy. And if you want to destroy the hope of a lot of people, take the life of a child, ruin the life of a child, right? Most of us, as we get older, would take on so much discomfort so that a child wouldn't suffer. So if you want to ruin the hope of a family or a community, you have a kid that just can't get better, that is in pain. That sounds like the enemy. So whether it's demonic or medical, there would not have been a medical cure or an understanding of what is going on. We don't know what. So perhaps it was demonic, and the only word they have for this situation is lunatic or epileptic. The point is, Jesus met their need. So Jesus comes down, and his disciples have been unable to heal this boy, and Jesus heals them. Matthew 17:17 says this, and Jesus answered, O faithless and twisted generation, how long am I to be with you? How long am I to bear with you? Bring him here to me. Some of us, when we have a hard time conceptualizing God as having emotion. Emotions are from God. It is clear that he feels things. He feels passion. He feels anger. He feels love. Here, he's exasperated. Right? That seems pretty clear. And it's written in a way that is not mythical or just like, we just want to give words so humans understand. Like, Jesus the man is like, honestly, right? Bruh. And just would have gone down the 9. Bruh, bruh, bruh. Like this, because it's the tonal word, right? How long am I to be with you? How long can I bear with you? O faithless and twisted generation. This language appears a few other times in Scripture. We see it in Exodus. In the story, Moses is up on the mountain, and he's getting the 10 Commandments. And there's this cloud, and there's lightning, and he's been up there a long time. And God has led them out of Egypt. He's been leading them, and now he's providing them with the law, the teaching. This is how you are to live and worship, and how you're to fix relationships when they go awry. All that stuff. The 10 Commandments are being given to Moses. But when the people saw that Moses delayed to come down from the mountain, the people gathered themselves together to Aaron and said to him, Up! I love that. Up! Make us gods who shall go before us. As for this Moses, the man who brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we do not know what has become of him. So Aaron said to them, Take off the rings of gold that are in the ears of your wives, your sons, and your daughters, and bring them to me. So all the people took off the rings of gold that were in their ears and brought them to Aaron. And he received the gold from their hand and fashioned it with a graving tool and made a golden calf. And they said, These are your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt. So Moses goes down and sees this situation. I've always been stunned by this, like just that quick of an about face. And it seems somehow that, if you know the story, like Aaron seems to get away with murder here. Like, this is a really bad situation that Aaron allowed himself to be brought into. The Israelites, we have to understand that as God through Moses is leading the Israelites out of Egypt, there isn't really a developed faith, like Israelite or Hebrew faith. Like the Jewish religion didn't really exist. Very, very immature, fledgling kind of thing. This is what God is giving Moses. So they don't know what to do, and it makes the most sense to have a God you can see right there. Like we're going to make a God, and we're going to put all of our energy into worshiping this thing. We're going to see someone making with their hands, where we want to worship that. This is the God. We know a God is leading us. It must be this. So Moses comes down, and he sees the situation. Exodus 32:9. And the Lord said to Moses, I have seen this people. Behold, it is a stiff-necked people. The Israelites needed constant reminders of what God had done for them. Constantly, they would forget and remember, forget and remember. That's why we have a cairn on our stage and why our church logo is a cairn. We want to remember what God has done and remember to remember. When they forgot it was God who delivered them from slavery, they lost their gratitude and reverence. When we get impatient, we assume God can't be trusted. And then we put our faith in our own hands, what we can control. We reduce God to a tool we can manipulate and use rather than a Father Creator to be loved and trusted. We do this too. We redefine God in our own image. In Deuteronomy is written this is the fifth book in the Bible, and it kind of sums up the first four. This is what's happened, and it's given to the people of Israel before they take the promised land, right? So before they take over a land that they didn't earn, I provided you a home. I've given you a name. I've given you a calling and a purpose. Your purpose is not your own. Your purpose is to serve the whole world, that the whole world can know me. Before you go there, God gives a warning, and Deuteronomy is phrased largely as a warning. Here in 32, the rock, his work is perfect, for all his ways are justice, a God of faithfulness and without iniquity. just and upright as he. They have dealt corruptly with him. They are no longer his children because they are blemished. They are a crooked and twisted generation. Does that sound familiar? Do you thus repay the Lord, you foolish and senseless people? Is not he your father who created you, who made you and established you? They were about to take possession of the promised land, a home they didn't provide for themselves. And they're being forewarned about the dangers of their own arrogance and forgetfulness. When we forget who God really is, we lose who we're meant to be. We lose ourselves in the process. More recent to this moment in Matthew 17, in Matthew 12, there's this experience. Jesus has been teaching, and the scribes and Pharisees, they call out, "Teacher, we wish to see a sign from you." But he answered them, "An evil and adulterous generation seeks for a sign, but no sign will be given to it except the sign of the prophet Jonah." They're doing the right thing. They're going to God, right? They're going to God. They're asking God to do something, but they're doing it for the wrong reasons. When we reduce God to a vending machine to serve our momentary craving, we lose out on the full inheritance he has planned for us. These are the images Jesus is calling to mind when he calls out the disciples for being a faithless and twisted generation. They're getting God wrong. They're saying the right words, and they're doing the right things, right? These are disciples who likely prayed over this boy. They want to help this boy, but they're getting it wrong somehow. Our faith language can often trip us up. I was talking with Nancy. Where you at, Nancy? There you are. Thank you. I lose people even in this room. Before service, and sometimes you'll talk with someone and they're like, "I don't believe in God." "Well, tell me about God," and then they just define God. I'm like, "I don't believe in that God either," right? Sometimes our understanding of who Jesus is wrong. We've gotten him wrong. We've gotten God wrong, and so we're believing or not believing in the wrong thing. And sometimes we're believing in the right God, but we're getting things wrong in the process. Our language is important. Matthew 17, 19, 20, the last bit of this passage. Then the disciples came to Jesus privately. So Jesus has called them out publicly, right? Faithless and twisted generation. He's calling out his disciples. And so they're like, "Hey, he's worked up," right? And we've seen him do some amazing things. So we're just going to wait and take a private moment. They take a private moment and they ask him, "Why could we not cast it out?" And he said to them, "Because of your little faith. For truly I say to you, if you have faith like a grain of mustard seed, you will say to this mountain, 'Move from here to there,' and it will move, and nothing will be impossible for you." What could this mean? The disciples had been following Jesus, and God had healed and delivered people through their hands, through their prayers. And they had risked everything to be with him. Some had let, I don't think, remember, this is Matthew's gospel. So Luke wasn't a follower of Jesus till later. But Matthew and Mark, when they record their stories, they're ratting on themselves. Like, "Yeah, I blew it. That was me," right? So that's bold. And Matthew was a tax collector, so he lost his job, right? Others probably kept their jobs. They just followed Jesus and maybe went back and forth to attend to business. But they were gone for weeks, maybe months at a time. They lost credibility. They missed key moments with family. They had risked everything to be with Jesus. Surely they had faith. I mean, if they didn't, who does? If the disciples didn't have faith, and I don't know if I do, right? I mean, think, when you read this passage, when you read the Gospels, you don't read a story of disciples who don't have faith. So what is Jesus doing? What is he talking about? Because this simply does not look like a group of people who lacked faith. I'm not trying to disagree with Jesus. Hear me out. First, a word on airborne mountains. I grew up, I was a skier. My whole life was oriented for like 6-8 years. My life was oriented around downhill skiing. My birthday is in November and then Christmas, so many of my gifts were ski gifts, clothing, skis, and that's a tough period because even though I peaked this high, pretty early, you're still growing, so you need all new stuff all the time, everything. And then when I started working, all my money went towards ski stuff. I just didn't care about anything else. And I've heard this passage taught literally, right? If you have enough faith, Jake, and I'm from Michigan, where we had good skiing for the Midwest. Good skiing. And it wasn't until sophomore year of high school that I had skied in any mountains. And so, but then I started following Jesus. Well, if you have enough faith, you can bring the Rockies to Michigan, right? Well, that sounds great. Think of how many people would have fun with that. That is not what Jesus is talking about. It would be chaos. I mean, how would we have maps? Just all of a sudden you're driving along and there's a mountain right in front of me or a lake. This is hyperbole. It was a common phrase meaning to do something especially difficult. So Jesus is saying, with prayer, with faith, you're going to see amazing things happen. But this, he says, he refers to this mountain, not a mountain. So he's talking about the mountain, this mountain where I just came down from, this mountain where this amazing thing happened. Only three of your fellows know about it, and maybe they haven't heard about it yet, but this amazing thing happened up there. If you have faith of a mustard seed, you can move this mountain. I think what he's suggesting is not only could amazing things happen, but things that are more amazing than what just happened. We might feel disappointed about not witnessing something so amazing and unique as the Transfiguration. Only 3 people saw that. But what if Jesus didn't rate that as highly as lives changed by his grace? If he didn't rate that as highly as different kinds of people gathering in his name, and people finding purpose for their lives, and people humbling themselves out of gratitude for what Jesus had done for them, and people realizing and offering their God-given gifts to the benefit of the church. If the prayer of the tax collector and the widow's penny are a bigger deal than that. And the people of God watching time and time again a couple of fish and loaves of bread feeding thousands. Or people forgiving each other. People being reconciled. With the mustard seed faith, you will see mountains move. It's sometimes harder to imagine people being reconciled than it is to imagine a mountain showing up in northern Michigan. What about the bit about the mustard seed? Have we established that the disciples have had some faith? I think he's calling out what he had seen time and time again in the people of Israel. They have faith, but it's misdirected, it's misdefined. Brings us back to the beginning of this message and the story of the Israelites, which is our own story. Disciples lacking faith echoes the problems Israel faced when Moses was on the mountain. It speaks of faithfulness in times of silence and perceived absence, questioning, drought, and life between the cairns. Sometimes life is hard and we need to remain faithful through those times rather than putting our faith in something else. The disciples had been equipped and empowered to perform exorcisms, but it failed. They had the faith to follow Jesus and to try to deliver this boy, but it doesn't happen. This doesn't sound like a lack of faith. I think what happened is they put their faith in their own hands, just like the Israelites had done in Exodus. We can do this. We got this. Anyone who's been in ministry knows that temptation. That trap. You do this enough and you can kind of do it almost robotically. I have a friend who early in his ministry realized he's super smart. He doesn't live here, so you can't go to his church. So super smart, and he realized I can write a pretty good message without praying about it. And he was concerned about that. That is not a good thing for me to know about myself. It's not a good trajectory. And so he developed the practice of every day he taught the Bible, he fasted that entire day. So Sunday mornings, he would fast the whole day. This became hard when he would preach Sunday and Wednesday for his young adults group, and then would maybe teach a Bible class, and so eventually he had to adopt a different practice. But we can do the right things, sharing the gospel or leading people in worship, and it's good to do this, right? We're told to honor our ministers, but we can do it with the wrong motivations. I really like it when people say I did a good job. And it's good to give people applause, to thank them for their work. But we can do this for the wrong reasons. And I think that's what happened to the disciples. As you look at the pattern of Jesus, of Scripture, calling out these kinds of generations, this kind of faith, because their faith had changed. They'd moved from faith in Jesus, trusting in Jesus and the Holy Spirit working through them, to trusting themselves. I got this. Now, it's good to grow in your craft. Whatever it is that you do, it's good to get better at it. There's nothing wrong with becoming more skilled as a worship leader, a musician, as a teacher, all of that. We are to prepare and to practice and to do the work we need to do whatever it is that you're called to do. Could be a nurse, could be a teacher, could be a real estate agent, whatever it might be. Fix cars, do graphics, you name it. It's good to grow, but we need to remember who it is who called us, who it is who equipped us. And the degree to which we forget that, I think that's what Jesus is addressing here. You've forgotten me. You've forgotten to honor me. And this is going to send you in a twisted direction, a faithless and twisted direction, just like the Israelites had time and time again. So he's warning his disciples, you're heading in a wrong direction. You know the story of your people. You know how bad it got for them. If you're reading your Bible, if you have that open or if you have an app open, you may have noticed that I'm covering through verse 20, and then there's no verse 21. What happened to verse 21? I want to talk about that because I think it makes sense to what Jesus is saying here. Verse 21 is in some translations, sometimes there's brackets around it with a little note below that says something like verse 21 is not in the oldest copies of Matthew. What does that mean? We don't have a copy from like 60 AD or 70 AD of like all the books in the Bible that we now have. We have copies, we have fragments, we have portions of them, and scholars have put those together to get the most accurate version, which is probably, we believe, a very accurate version of what was initially written. The oldest copies of Matthew don't have verse 21. And more recent ones, within 100 or so years, have verse 21 in there because Mark has it. And Matthew borrowed from Mark when he was writing his gospel. And Mark has this, and so it seems like Jesus said this from Mark 9:29. But this kind never comes out except by prayer and fasting. So Matthew maybe didn't write that down. It seems to be true that Jesus said that. The sentiment rings true. Reverence and submission, gratitude are the postures we must take before Jesus. Even for the disciple, even for you and me, we must maintain this posture. It's an ironic incongruity that often plagues the seasoned disciple. The more we learn, the more prideful and self-sufficient we can become. As we grow in grace, we can become hard-hearted or stiff-necked, to use the old word. So to avoid this situation and this kind of call out, Jesus says, you need to submit, you need to sacrifice, you need to remember who I am, and prayer and fasting will help you do that. This is a call out and a warning. It's a cautionary tale. It's human nature to get ahead of ourselves. We do this time and time again, over and over again. And Jesus in his grace calls us out to trust what we see, to want control, to get our priorities out of order, to look right while being wrong, to put faith in the wrong things, to use the right words with the wrong definition. Worship team, if you want to come up. Jesus calls us out because he loves us. He calls out his disciples, and he had given them much, and so he expected much, so he used strong words for them. You faithless and twisted group of dudes, what is your problem? Just need a vacation, right? He calls us out because he loves us. Time and time again, Jesus, the Good Shepherd, goes out of his way to lead us back to safe pastures. He does this because we wander, because we get lost, because we follow the wrong directions, we use the wrong map. And he deserves our gratitude. We're going to sing this song, This Is How I Thank the Lord. The prayer team, if you want to go, there'll be people in the prayer room if you want to pray about anything I've talked about or anything else in your life or for anyone else, they're there to pray with you. Jesus deserves our gratitude. He deserves another chance to reform our hearts to be a little bit more like his. All of us have something that he needs to work on. And he gives us each other, he gives us his word, he gives us community and prayer and moments of worship as an opportunity for him to chisel away a little bit more or call us back. Maybe we're going in the right direction and we've lost our way. So he calls us back. Just like he called the disciples, he calls us, his disciples, back because he's the Good Shepherd. So let's take a moment. If you want to stand, we stand. Let's sing this song and let's thank Jesus for his grace.